Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond Expo. For this session, we're going to be discussing the state of the global venture capital industry and asking the question, is the drought season here? We're very privileged to have two amazing speakers with us, Tom Tsao, founding partner of Gobi Partners, and Connie Chan, general partner of Andreessen Horowitz. Now, some are calling it the Great VC Shakedown or Shakeout. Others are calling it the Big Freeze. Whatever terms you may use, no one can deny that this rising inflationary environment, the turbulence in the capital markets, the global supply chain challenges, the recurring COVID surges, and the Ukraine war are all having a significant impact on the venture capital's confidence in deploying investments across the world. Today's panel brings together two of the industry's most prominent investors from the US and from Asia, providing us with a comprehensive perspective on how VC sentiment is evolving. From the heart of Silicon Valley to the tech parks of Shenzhen, all the way to the Twin Towers of Kuala Lumpur, we will take a pulse on how investors are assessing the impact of this highly volatile global market environment, how these changes present both new challenges and opportunities, and how emerging technology trends are shaping the market landscape. So Thomas Tsao is a venture capital investor and co-founder of Pan-Asian venture capital firm Gobi Partners. He has over 30 years of experience in venture capital, operations, fund management, and investment banking. Over the last 20 years, Tom has actively helped entrepreneurs build companies and create value. Tom co-founded Gobi Partners in 2002 and has been named Forbes' list of top VCs for a number of years. Tom also led the team that manages the Alibaba Hong Kong Entrepreneurs Fund and has invested in a number of companies through that fund, such as AutoX, GoGoX, Prenetics, WeLab, and many more. In 2015, Tom relocated to Kuala Lumpur, where he set up several funds with Mavcap, Malaysia's largest VC firm. Through this move, Tom has had a direct hand in shaping Southeast Asia's vibrant startup scene by investing in now well-known names such as Carsome, Delivery, Easy Parcel, and many more. In 2016, Tom launched the firm's Taqwa vertical, which focuses on Islamic ventures in the global Muslim economy. Notable names under this vertical are Umrami, Ryder, Truckiton, and Collabs. So very honored to have you today, Tom. Next, we have Connie Chan, a good friend and general partner at Andreessen Horowitz, where she focuses in on consumer technology. Connie's made a name for herself during her multi-decade career, blazing trails for women in the venture capital space by discovering game-changing consumer tech companies in Silicon Valley, and has been crowned the China Whisperer of Silicon Valley with her ability to spot game-changing Asian and Chinese technologies that can transfer back to the US. Connie joined the firm in 2011 as a deal partner on the investment team before becoming a general partner in 2018. She serves on the boards of Cider, Whatnot, and Kobold. Before joining Andreessen Horowitz, Connie worked at HP, leading its WebOS efforts in China. She started her career as a private equity investor in Elevation Partners, investing in media and entertainment, and has a number of accolades as a venture capitalist, including Fast Company's Most Creative People, Wired's Next 20 Tech Visionaries. She's been on the Midas Brink list and is a young global leader at the World Economic Forum. Connie, thanks so much for joining us today, and it's great to see you. So with that, some very impressive backgrounds with our speakers. We're going to jump into a number of questions and really try and delve into what's the state of venture capital today. We're going to start with Connie. Connie, you're a veteran investor in Silicon Valley and even born and raised and educated in the heart of the Bay Area. You've seen a number of market cycles in your career and the trends in the industry from Web 1.0 all the way to Web 3.0, something which Andreessen is also very much focused on. As a general partner at one of the most preeminent firms in the Valley, tell us what you're seeing on the ground in light of the macro factors I previously mentioned. Also, there's a lot of chatter about the incidence of layoffs at startups, headcount freezes at the big tech companies, and fear of down rounds for firms looking to raise money. How bad is it really, and where do you see the market headed as we enter 2023? Okay, I think you're on mute, Connie.
Apologies. Great question, Brian. Obviously the macro changes have been widely covered. In the last several months, we've seen many companies across pretty much every industry have to take a relook at their priorities, their areas of investment, and a lot of teams, not just the small startups, but large companies too, are evaluating their runways and trying to figure out how can they make the capital, the cash that they have in the bank last longer so that they have more time to reach their milestones so they can fundraise in a more favorable environment down the line. For many of the companies in our portfolio, this often means that they are spending more time focusing on their go-to-market strategies. They are re-looking at, they're taking a closer look at their tax. How are they acquiring customers? How are they retaining customers, making sure those LTV CAC ratios work? Basically going back to basic unit economics, which is actually a very healthy thing for the environment. In terms of what the large tech companies are doing, I can't speak to them specifically, but I would say in terms of large companies, if you've seen the things that they've announced over the last couple of months, you've seen large consumer companies kind of pull back from a lot of the experimental things that they were doing. So Instagram announcing that they're going to deprioritize commerce as an example, or Snap during their layoff, they deprioritized a number of things, including their accelerator, games, their original content effort. But from where I sit, that actually creates new areas of opportunities for startups. One, a lot of talent that comes out of these companies, they're very well trained, they're very capable, and a lot of them are now thinking of what they want to do next, whether it's join a company or potentially start a new company. So there's a lot of talent that can now join the startups we've already funded, and there's a lot of potential new founders that we can fund down the line. But overall, I'd say we're still making a lot of investments. On the consumer side, our deal flow is potentially, I'd say, probably a little slower than last year. But we're still looking at lots of companies, and there's still lots of areas we're actively investing in. I'm particularly excited about new, I'd say, kind of private, smaller, curated communities as a potential area of investment. I look at Facebook groups and how it's still thriving and flourishing, and one of the main features that people use when they use the Facebook app. And I wonder, are there new startups that can tackle or take the best learnings from groups and create large businesses out of that? I'm always excited about companies that are using video first or an AI first way of rethinking how to solve a problem. I'm also very excited about, like you mentioned, Brian, cross-border trends or things that already had mainstream adoption in China, and figuring out how we can port that over to the US. In the US, for example, I think we're still in the earliest days of live shopping. Video shopping is still yet to be a very big mainstream trend, but to me, it's inevitable that kind of will happen and be a big trend next year.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Connie, for sharing that. So it sounds like despite these macro trends and some challenges that people have identified, that presents new opportunities, and you're very much sort of looking closely at how those are emerging. And it doesn't sound like the VC industry by any means is slowing down. It's more about kind of how you adapt to these changes.
Yeah, for sure. My team's hiring. A lot of teams are still hiring, but we're still growing.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move to Tom now. Tom, as founding partner of Gobi Ventures, you're one of the longest running Asian VC firms with formative roots beginning in Shanghai, but you're also one of the earliest VCs to set up in Southeast Asia, operating in many of the countries in the region from Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, all the way to Pakistan and beyond. Asia has not been immune to some of these challenges we talked about that are hitting Silicon Valley. Publicly listed firms, even like SEA and others, have lost more than half their market value in the public markets because of this downturn. And also, a number of companies have announced layoffs. At the same time, when I visited Singapore just last month, I was amazed by how much activity was going on there. Even Chinese tech executives and fund managers looking to either open new international offices in the region and even setting up new funds. Is it really the VC winter, or are we, witnessing more of a reset? Tell us what you're seeing from the region.
Yeah, hey, Brian, it's great to be here with you and Connie. Great to see everyone. And again, thanks to TechNode and Lu Gang for inviting me. Um, Brian, I think that, yeah, again, great question. I think, folks like Connie and I can appreciate that. I know it's bad out there. Sentiment is not good. But according to my count, this is like the fifth time the VC industry was supposed to like collapse, right? At least what I can remember, was what was it? The Asian financial crisis in '97, right? The dot-com bubble. I lived through SARS in Shanghai. Then we had the great financial recession, right? Crisis 08, '09. And then we just went through COVID. Each time, there was talk that, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. And I think each time the VC industry came out, showed and demonstrated its resilience. And although it's really bad, I mean, we are seeing a perfect storm of really a big trends all coming together, and it's going to be painful for everybody in the short term, but long term, I think we'd all agree here. I mean, if you're in the venture industry, you're always a get glasses kind of half full type of individual, and I think this time it will also power through. It's because of the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Right? What they bring to the table, the problem solving that they continue to demonstrate, that's what's going to get us all through. And the problems are bigger. They're global in nature. And so I do think, I don't know if it's a reset as much as a shift. I think what's been going on, and I know we're going to touch upon this later, what's been going on kind of from a macro standpoint is really allowing the entire venture capital mindset to shift and distribute to other parts of the world, right? Because if you think about it, I mean, VC and this tremendous innovation culture has largely been kind of concentrated in China and the US have been taking up so much of the spotlight. And I think with what's been going on, it's allowed some of that spotlight to shift to other regions and bring in more entrepreneurs into this global ecosystem. And we're certainly seeing that. And Brian, you touched upon that for Southeast Asia. I think just coming up right now, Singapore is going to be a hive of activity in the next 2 weeks. I think there's 6 conferences going on, bookended by, they're starting off with Super Return now, bookended by the F1. There's going to be thousands of people. I think Singapore is in danger of sinking into the ocean. So many people are showing up. So I think that, that's still going on. And I think, the industry is going to find a way, right? There's other things, right? It's bringing attention to other markets like Pakistan, right? So I think people are looking further away from the 2 traditional mainstream ecosystems. And that's kind of what we're seeing.
Exciting. I think those are very astute observations, Tom. And I think there's so much going on now in these frontier markets that you talked about, markets that we haven't considered traditionally, but at the same time, both Silicon Valley, US, and China, the tech sector, all have inspired and influenced, but they're also developing in their own ways. So thank you for highlighting that. I'm going to pose a question now to both of you to talk about, how your respective funds, investment strategies, and sector focus have evolved. Again, given these macro trends, things like the pandemic and the climate change that we're experiencing, there's been an increased focus on concepts like ESGs. And I wonder if you guys are moving away from just the pure consumer tech, sort of profile, and looking at areas that have more focus on things like healthcare, clean, green tech, sustainability elements. I mean, I imagine these are things that have been on your radar in the past, but they're becoming even more important and critical. And how real is all this in light of some of the critics calling out greenwashing? There's been a lot of criticism of ESGs as well. So what are you guys thinking in terms of your portfolio kind of focus, but also, what are the demands that you're hearing from your LPs and that they're placing on you guys as fund managers in light of these trends? We'll go back to Connie first. Yeah.
Sure. I love this category. One of the three boards that I sit on is Cobalt Metals, and it's a software company that uses AI and machine learning to map out the Earth's crust for mineral mapping. And they basically have a way of using algorithms to figure out where to dig for copper, nickel, lithium, cobalt, and rare earth metals, all critical metals that are required for electric vehicle batteries. And if you look at the demand for EVs, if you just even want to convert all passenger vehicles from gas to EVs, we are short globally over $10 trillion worth of those 5 categories of metals alone. And that's a deal that I did pre-COVID. So it's not like a recent change for me, but I do think what is different is that particular problem, all the supply chain issues around EVs or the need to electrify the world, is now much more of a mainstream topic. And so there's a lot more attention being put on the space. A lot more capital is realizing the demand for EVs has very much been pulled forward, not just through regulation, but just pure consumer demand. When consumers are buying new cars now, they are looking for EV opportunities. So I look at it not just because of I guess, pressures or input from LPs, but just because I think it's a fantastic business opportunity if you find the right team and the right business model. For me in particular, when I'm looking at things kind of in the climate space, so I'm still focused on software-driven companies. I don't have the expertise to evaluate a lot of the hardware solutions, but I still think there's fantastic opportunities that use software to address these large problems in climate.
Sorry, I'm back. You guys. Oh my God, it was like frozen, and I'm like, oh shoot. You were talking, Connie, about pressures from LPs. Should we? Do you mind if we kind of restart that question? Maybe
Yeah.
you're comfortable.
I'll do that one again. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. So, yeah. Do you want me to repeat the question, or are you okay? You know what I said.
I know what you said.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Just start from top, right, on this question?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, okay. No problem.
Okay. All right.
So Brian, one of the board seats that I sit on that you mentioned earlier is Cobalt Metals. And this is a company I'm very proud of. What they do is they use AI and machine learning to do mineral mapping of the Earth's crust and below. So using software to better guess where to dig for copper, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth metals. And I'd classify this kind of company in some ways like a climate tech company, because you are basically searching for more necessary metals that are required in EV batteries, a very necessary component. I mean, globally, if we just want to convert passenger vehicles from gas to electric, we are short over $10 trillion worth of these metals alone. So the reason, though, why I'm excited about it is not necessarily because of LP pressure, but because I think it's just truly a great financial opportunity. There's very clear consumer demand in climate. Some of it is regulatory, some of it is purely consumer. In the US, a lot of that EV demand is coming just from consumer preference. People are looking not just at Teslas, but they're pushing a bunch of other car manufacturer brands to start pulling their EV roadmaps forward, because that's what consumers are looking for. So I've been spending more time in climate. It's not just because of regulation or LP pressure or anything like that, but just purely because I think it's a great financial opportunity.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Connie, for sharing that fascinating company that you're on the board of. Tom, how do you see these trends kind of impacting, your portfolio and your areas of focus?
Well, I think just what Connie was saying, I absolutely agree with. I think a lot of it is not only because of LP pressure, but there's opportunities like what Connie was talking about, EVs. Absolutely, consumer demand is increasing. And it's not only on the production, the batteries, but actually, how consumers are going to buy EVs. And so companies, we have a company,
Charge them, right?
yeah, exactly. So battery swapping is an area we're looking at, but even on just how do you buy an EV? We have a company called Carsum, and I think the new EV manufacturers may move away or are already moving away from the traditional dealership model. I mean, we use e-commerce on everything. Why can't we buy cars online? And so I think that's going to make, how people purchase EVs easier. You're seeing a lot of interest from the Chinese EV manufacturers. They don't necessarily want to set up dealerships in Southeast Asia, for example. They want to go direct. Everybody in China is so familiar with buying things online. That mentality, I think, is seeping through. And I think one day you're going to be able to buy an EV online and get it delivered to you just like you would, like on Taobao or Tmall. And so that day is coming. So you're seeing that. And if it's easier to buy EVs, fantastic. Problem solved, one. But then how do you charge? Right, Connie? So you mentioned that already. So we have to build out that infrastructure. Is it going to be charging stations or battery swapping or some new type of model? All exciting areas to look at. So I think that's
all the prop tech related to that, right? It's like a lot of apartments or high rises. Those garages are not outfitted with chargers, or I mean, even on the buildings and the commercial buildings, they need to start managing their carbon footprints, right? So there's a lot of opportunity in climate.
I totally agree. And then the second thing is, I think everybody here, what Gobi's doing with Andreessen is there's also a growing realization after, COVID, is that, look, venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, I mean, we have to solve these problems. And if we don't do it, there's nobody else that's going to do it. The world is increasingly interconnected. We don't live in little pockets of prosperity. When one part of the world suffers, I mean, we all suffer, right? And that's what I think the next decades, right? Whether it's COVID knows no borders, right? Climate change, there's no borders, and that's why it's an increasingly interconnected. I know parts of the world want to go back to, more, what is it? You know what I'm saying? Like nationalistic tendencies, or go back to silos. But the reality is, we're all interconnected. Pollution is a cross-border problem, right? Healthcare is a cross-border problem. And so, it's going to take a new mindset.
Yeah. And the capitalist way of interpreting what Tom just said is there's a lot of great talent now going into these industries. We have a whole separate bio and health fund that's chasing all these opportunities. And some of those founders are not coming from those sectors. They are people who during COVID or before COVID decided they wanted to dedicate their lives for a new mission.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So in a way, this new environment is creating new challenges, new problems, but that's exactly what fuels venture capital innovation, is solving problems. And in a way, you've got even more now to tackle, and all the better that you have the funds to allocate to solving these problems. That's great. Thank you, guys. Interesting answers to this. Let's go to another issue that's affecting all of us that seems to have no borders, which is this US-China tension. It's ratcheting up every day. There is also, decoupling in the making. A multitude of industries and investment areas now already seem to be affected by this new sentiment. So share with us how this geopolitical tension is affecting the markets you're active in. Obviously, Connie, you're someone who has an eye on both U.S. and China innovation, and you've been someone who's been able to bridge that and kind of show the benefits for each in terms of collaboration and learning. So how has it affected and impacted your own investment strategies in the companies you invest in, and is there a silver lining to all this? So we'll go back to you, Connie.
I mean, there's definitely some silver linings, but I agree with you that the tensions are not looking like they're on a great trajectory. Mm-hmm. I mean, the most obvious near-term impacts, there are supply chain issues for companies that have physical merchandise that needs to be moved cross-border. But there are also industries that are not as favorable in the eyes of venture capitalists. And this is especially true for a lot of consumer companies in China. However, I do think the silver lining is that talent is still talent, and there's still great founders everywhere. I meet founders in the US, in China, all over the world now, and many of them, rather than building just for their respective countries, they are building for a global audience. Today, if I looked at the App Store in the US, the top 2 apps are widget apps. I think they're Chinese developers. And the second one, there are 4 Chinese characters in the name of the app. It is so blatantly a Chinese developer, Chinese app. And number 2 in the US App Store today. So I just think this idea that the top apps can come from everywhere and every country is still going to be true, no matter how these kind of US-China tensions persist. Talent, thanks to TikTok, now realizes if you're a founder in China, you can build for the entire world. You can still go outside of, you can dominate China, but you can also grow and expand outside of that region. So I think talent right now still is more global minded than they were, say, 5 years ago. And that's a really great silver lining.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way, if people can frame the issues and the challenges more on a global basis, maybe that will help overcome some of this attitudinal barriers, such that, again, as we were talking about VC, if our common goal is to solve these problems, hopefully that mitigates some of this tension, but understanding that politics always plays a role in how people interact. Okay, great. Tom, how about you? You're someone who's in a region that is really kind of a confluence of different cultures and political sort of systems. So and right next to China, but also a lot of influence from the United States.
Well, I think I think Connie spoke so eloquently already on one of the silver linings. I'll shift to another. Again, I think what we're seeing is one of the beneficiaries or silver linings that we're seeing is Southeast Asia is getting a lot of attention just because it is a very culturally and diverse region that has connections to both kind of China, India, and the US. And I think, again, there's just, like you were saying, Brian, it's a mixture, right? And so because Southeast Asia can draw upon so many of these influences, and again, it's still relatively open, right? So right now, kind of, Chinese capital, Chinese entrepreneurs, not necessarily welcome in the US and vice versa. Where are they all welcome? Southeast Asia, right? Great English. People can speak Chinese, Cantonese, great Indian influence. There's Bahasa. There's different religions, Buddhism, Islam. It's a fantastic melting pot in a certain way, and it's completely open. So what we're seeing now are entrepreneurs where, again, because of the political tension, maybe the governments can't directly bridge, but, people to people, they still want what's convenient, right? So we have a company called SleekFlow that's building a platform across WeChat, WhatsApp, Line, right? Wouldn't you like something? Because you don't really care. You just want one kind of a dashboard where you can communicate with any of your friends without being constrained to, if I'm in China, I can only use WeChat. And so I think you're seeing these interesting solutions come because, people want to talk to each other and they want to do what's convenient. So I give that as an easy example. And there's so many more, right? So governments are trying to kind of, do the typical kind of, hey, I want to control. And I understand that, but people are global by nature. They want to connect with anybody who's their friend, and they may not have the same considerations. And again, I think that's going to create opportunities for entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Fascinating. So while the world is, and the governments are trying to decouple, you have businesses and venture companies that are trying to recouple the communities. That's a fascinating phenomenon, yet definitely a need. I think most people would appreciate the fact they don't have to open up multiple apps just to do, talk to, their friends in different countries. Well, Tom, you mentioned, we talked about China, and Gobi started in Shanghai probably over 20 years ago. Obviously, you're now in Southeast Asia, but you still have funds operating in China.
We do, yes.
Obviously, it hasn't been an easy few years with changes in the regulatory environment and a lot of kind of, how should I say, attention around different sectors that, have been significantly affected by these policy changes. However, many have pointed out this really represents maturation in certain sectors and an intention to shift the flow of capital from to other high priority industries and sectors. One interesting region of growth seems to be the Greater Bay Area. The areas around southern China, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Macau, Hong Kong. Tell us how Gobi's navigating these changes in the Chinese tech markets, and a bit more about the prospects of what they call the Greater Bay Area.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of kind of headlines out there. So maybe just to share with the audience what we're thinking. I think if you look, and I've been very lucky, I think, to be a witness to kind of China's evolution. I think we're now in phase 3. What I mean by that is phase 1, the government was very focused on building out Beijing and Zhongguancun, right, as kind of that tech hub. That went on for a certain amount of time. And then when Gobi set up in 2002, we were very fortunate because we caught that second wave. And I remember when we set up in 2002, we were one of the few VC funds operating out of Shanghai.
Yeah.
But then again, it's, I was very fortunate, and I did something that most people actually, should do, is just read the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan said they were going to develop Shanghai as the center for the semiconductor industry. I ended up living, Brian, if you remember, in Zhangjiang, which was right next to SMIC. My children even went to SMIC's school, which at one point was one of their biggest revenue generators before the fabs got online. But I always laugh. The Chinese government kind of tells you the answers to the questions if you just kind of read the 5-year plan. And if you now look at the next 5-year plan, it's very clear. They're going to develop out the Greater Bay Area, which I think is one of the most exciting experiments going on in human history. China is trying to build out the world's first megalopolis. Megalopolis, look that word up. I didn't know what that word meant either, but it's when you take like a number of cities and put it together to make it into one huge super city, right? And so we're talking about an area now, 11 cities, the 9+2, right? And it's 70 million people, 70 to 80 million people as a standalone basis. Brian and Connie, you'll love this, right? Every time they say, hey, if California were its own country, it'd be the 5th largest in the world, right? If the Greater Bay Area were its own country, it would be the same size, the same GDP as South Korea, right? So we're talking about something very big. And what makes it different this time? Because in the past, Brian, they talked about the Pearl River Delta. I mean, this is not a new concept.
Yeah.
This time it's different. It's because the central government is really putting in the infrastructure, one, and the policies, right? So we're talking about tax equalization, right? So if you're getting taxed at Hong Kong rates and you go work in GBA, you'll be taxed at Hong Kong rates. You're talking about pension fund portability. They're really talking about kind of free movement of labor, which is, they didn't do that before. Right, so they're putting in the policies, and imagine, we all know Hong Kong, fantastic place, but housing prices a little high. What if you could extend out the entire Greater Bay Area and commute? I mean, Brian, when I grew up in New York, it was very normal. I lived on Long Island. We used to commute an hour and a half from the Long Island Railroad into Manhattan. Nobody cares. In Hong Kong, it's like, oh my God, somewhere you got to walk 10 minutes. It's too far. I think that concept's going to change, and I think that's what's going to happen in Greater Bay Area. I think it's very exciting. So, yeah, China, headlines may be a bit negative, But if you look at overall what's going on, you disengage with China at your own risk. There's so much innovation still coming out.
Yeah.
And within China, I think the most exciting opportunity right now is the Greater Bay Area. And so we increased the size of our office in Hong Kong. Like Connie, we're looking to hire. So if you're looking, please contact me. And so there still continues to be incredible opportunities.
I'm still waiting for like a high-speed rail in California. I'll have to wait longer.
Hey, same thing, Connie. We're waiting for that high-speed rail from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore. And if they could build that, wow, game changer.
Oh, game changer. I mean, Connie, how long have you been waiting for that high-speed rail?
Decades.
We all love that. Wow. How do you pronounce that word, Tom?
Megalopolis. Megalopolis.
Super city.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, fascinating assessment of this potential, particularly around the Greater Bay Area. And as we come to a close of this panel, and it's been really enlightening. I appreciate all that you guys have shared with your insights. I want to wrap up with a question about entrepreneurship. Around, I guess, given entrepreneurship is all about maintaining an optimistic yet realistic outlook, and you guys both strike me as people who really see the positive side of any of these challenges, which I think is necessary when you're an entrepreneur or a venture capitalist. I want to use the final opportunity to ask each of you, what words of advice or encouragement would you have to share with any new investors who are brave enough to set up a fund amidst this time? Because I actually know that there's a number of people raising funds right now because this downturn in the market does represent an opportunity of sorts if you're able to actually raise the funds. But what advice or encouragement would you have for them? And two, any entrepreneurs who might be trying to raise funds now amidst this environment, what kind of final words would you have for either of them? Connie?
Sure. Well, on the investor side, I agree with you. There's a lot of opportunity when you invest in a downturn because things are a lot cheaper. If I look at valuations of the seed companies or the Series A companies that we were looking at a year versus now, they're way down, probably by over half. So you can buy things at a much lower price. And remember, in venture capital, our time horizons are very long. We're not usually seeing exits, at least in the US, for say 8 to 10 years. It's faster in China, but in the US, people often will stay private for longer. And so what will the economy look like 8 to 10 years from now? Will it be better than now? I think there's a good chance the answer is yes. And so as long as you kind of take that long-term approach, if you invest now, your buy-in price is just much cheaper than if you would invest later. I actually think the harder part is if you were an investor that raised money last year and deployed all of it last year, because they bought in at much higher prices.
Buyer's remorse.
Yeah, and now you're like hoping that those companies have enough cash to make it to their next round. You might be thinking about flat rounds. You might be thinking about down rounds. You have employee morale issues. Yeah. So the best situation is, like you said, if you raise the money, but you haven't deployed yet, and you can take your pick of the litter right now, because investors are taking longer to make their investment decisions. They are doing more diligence. And so if you have high conviction in an area and you can act with speed and conviction, you can get into great deals. And then in terms of advice for founders, I would say there's a lot of new technologies, such as AI, or generative AI right now is just starting to go mainstream in the US, and people don't know what all the major use cases are going to be. So there's still a lot of new technologies, whether it's AI or VR or what have you, that have yet to transform most of our day-to-day lives. And so I would say if you find a way to leverage new tech to make something 10x better, those opportunities are still there.
Yeah, outstanding. In very, very optimistic way of looking at things, particularly for those investors trying to raise funds in today's market. Thank you for that. Tom, how about you? What kind of advice would you have?
Yeah, no, I would just to say basically what Connie's saying, but I turn it into a question, right? It's what's the old saying? When is the best time to invest into a unicorn? That's 10 years ago. So when is the second best time to invest into a unicorn? It's today, right? So, you got to take a long-term view, right? It's just,
Yeah,
it's difficult. But again, I would again, I think as Connie was saying, we're all optimists here. I do think for the entrepreneurs out there, the mission is so critical. What you're doing is so critical, right? Look, when are we going to find the cure for cancer? Right? Can we ever develop packaging that after we throw it away, it becomes fertilizer? Can we make cars that the more you drive, the air gets cleaner? Can we make fast fashion where after you throw it out, or we use dyes that actually clean the water? And can we make prisons where actually they're also world-class educational facilities? I mean, these are questions, right, that I'm sure the entrepreneurs should be tackling, and they're really worthwhile. And I think your question earlier about ESG is that, as Connie was saying, these technologies and the mindset now, the scope of VC is expanding, I think. And the problems we're touching upon now are even more real. And so for all the entrepreneurs that are out there, hey, we've all been through it. Everybody, what's the old Plato saying? Be kind to everyone you meet. For everyone is having a difficult struggle. It's true. Every one of us were dealing. So it's tough for everybody. You're not alone. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Well said, Tom.
Very well said. And what I would add to that is, amidst a world where I think the problems and the challenges that we're facing become more and more existential, the one thing that gives me a glimmer of hope are people like yourselves and the entrepreneurs that you're backing, because you are, through your work, truly focusing on trying to come up with solutions for these problems. And we've got plenty of problems today that we have to tackle. So if that's an indication of opportunities for VC, I think you guys have a very bright future. So I want to thank you, Tom. Thank you, Connie, from opposite sides of the world. You guys are doing great work. Really encouraged by the sharing that you've offered us today. I think we will take to heart everything that you said, and hopefully the entrepreneurs and the investors have learned something from today's session. And again, appreciate your time.